There is a scene most history books skip, a strip of asphalt at dawn, a dozen small workshops huddled under leaking eaves, the smell of oil and sweat, and men and women arguing over a single blueprint by the light of a kerosene lamp. Making a car, once, was half courage and half prayer. A fragile marriage of hope, improv, and sheer luck. Dealers prayed for a good season. Engineers crossed their fingers during test drives. Families bought the promise, not the guarantee. That world was ruthless because it rewarded stories more than systems. A bright idea could sell 1,000 cars one year and leave customers stranded the next. Into that uncertain arena the Corolla was born. Unremarkable in curves, almost boring in ambition. But boring, as you will see, became its weapon. The story begins not with a stroke of marketing genius or a charismatic founder, but with a series of quiet choices, the meticulous tightening of a bolt, the refusal to accept excuses, the decision to build the same thing only slightly better every single day. Imagine a factory floor where rhythm matters more than spectacle, where a single misaligned panel could echo into millions of miles, where pride without repeatable practice is a liability. This is not a hagiography. It is a close study of pressure. Recalls that ruin reputations, margins that vanish under price wars, competitors who gamble with flash and fail to understand the grind. The real enemy was never the rival on the road. It was inconsistency, vanity projects that ignored fundamentals, fragile processes that depended on a single hero, systems that broke when people failed. And when those systems cracked, even the sturdiest brand can bleed. Listen to the quiet conversations between assembly line workers and engineers. Watch a used Corolla in a suburban driveway and hear a different language. A language of reliability earned day after day. We make mistakes, we recover. We standardize, we improve. If you find this approach useful, give the video a gentle like and stay with us. You might want to subscribe for the rest. Before we begin, tell me below, what's your greatest pain right now? Lack of discipline, lack of focus, or lack of customers? Now, to understand how the Corolla turned routine into resilience, we return to that early workshop and follow the first careful decisions that set everything in motion. By the late 1990s, the room smelled of burnt coffee and fluorescent hum, a small war room where engineers and dealers traded numbers like confessions. On one wall, a map of complaints glowed. Sudden acceleration, faulty airbags, wiring faults. On another, spreadsheets bled red. In that pressure cooker, the real enemy stopped being a rival brand or a volatile market. It revealed itself as something quieter and deadlier, the slow erosion of habits, decisions made for vanity, and systems that worked only when people were paying attention. An assembly line that relied on memory instead of measurement. A design review skipped because we've always done it this way. A supplier change approved to shave pennies without testing the ripple effects. Those were the fractures that spiraled into recalls and headlines. I told them months ago, an assembly foreman muttered, rubbing a linoleum-worn palm across his face, and you could hear the fatigue, not anger. A marketing director countered, voice low, but the quarterly numbers needed to look clean. Between them lay a culture stretched thin. Pride in past success colliding with shortcuts born of complacency. Customers, meanwhile, described the experience differently. A trusted companion that suddenly betrayed them on a highway. A family run delayed by a recall notice. Trust, once fractured, made every service appointment a trial, every dealer visit a courtroom. The catastrophe charts were ugly because they were mostly avoidable. Cost pressure had forced suppliers to consolidate. Consolidation meant single points of failure. Management incentives rewarded launches over robustness. And when failure arrived, the reflex was to defend reputation instead of illuminate root causes. In those moments, Toyota confronted a paradox. Resilience is not a slogan but a daily grind. 1,000 small disciplines maintained long after the cameras leave. In the dim light of that war room, engineers stopped blaming markets and began mapping processes. They started asking harder questions. Which step assumes someone remembers? Which inspection depends on goodwill? Which decision was made out of pride rather than proof? If you've ever stayed up worrying about a crack in your own product or process, this will resonate. Do you recognize a system that works only when someone cares enough to babysit it? Like this video if it rings true, and tell me in the comments. Which of these weaknesses keeps you awake most? Inconsistency, vanity, or broken systems? Subscribe quietly if you want to see how the next chapter turns those hard truths into the playbook that saved the Corolla. The machine stops. It is a tiny, almost imperceptible pause. A bolt not aligned, a sensor that hiccups, and for a moment the line holds its breath. In that silence you can hear everything Toyota learned the hard way. The memory of a recall, the sting of a lost reputation, the sleepless nights of managers trying to patch systems instead of fixing causes. A foreman named Sato steps forward, pulls the andon cord, and the whole factory obligingly halts. No blame, only work to be done. This is what we train for, he says, voice steady. The woman beside him, new to this line, watches as a small team gathers. They do not shout or point fingers. They ask simple questions. What happened? Where did the standard break? How do we stop it happening again? Within an hour they've traced the fault to a supplier change, adjusted the jig, updated the visual guide taped to the workstation, and documented the step in a notebook that everyone can read. The fix is surgical, not heroic. This is the climax not of a single car's story but of a system learning to survive. Kaizen here is not a slogan on a poster. It is the rhythm of the day, small, disciplined experiments that reduce variability. Jidoka, the principle of stopping when abnormality appears, turns failure into information. Standardized work becomes the baseline, not the ceiling. The scene is almost boring in its precision, and that is the point. Resilience is boring until you need it. If you run a business, imagine your spreadsheets replaced with visible marks on a wall, your quarterly meetings with 5-minute huddles that catch problems before they cascade. The blueprint is disturbingly simple. Make the basics repeatable, empower the front line to stop the line, require root cause thinking, and institutionalize tiny improvements until they compound into an advantage no competitor can buy overnight. On the floor, the new worker smiles, relieved and oddly proud. The line starts again, smoother now, carrying cars that will be counted on by families around the world. If this moment resonates, if you feel the urge to tighten a process or pull your own andon cord, leave a like and tell me which pain haunts you most. Lack of discipline, lack of focus, or lack of customers. Subscribe quietly to follow how this lesson scales from a single line to a global culture in the next chapter. Night falls on the plant and a single arc lamp picks out the Corolla badge, cold chrome catching the light like a promise. A foreman, hands stained with years of oils and routines, walks the line and pauses at a workstation where a young engineer tightens a single bolt for the 100th time that shift. They do not speak loudly. The language here is habit. The conversation is in the click of a torque wrench, the hush of an inspection light, the tiny blackboard where today's problem is written in chalk and solved, step by step. That quiet is Toyota's true victory. Not spectacle, but a daily, stubborn refusal to let small errors become disasters. We have seen the abyss. Recalls that could have ended reputations, margin squeezes, competitors chasing trends and prestige. The secret that pulled the Corolla back from that edge was never glamour. It was the long accumulation of tiny, repeatable acts. Asking why until the answer becomes a procedure, watching with your own eyes before deciding, and making discipline less about punishment and more about mutual respect for the system. In practice, this meant people empowered to stop the line, questions welcomed at every level, and an obsession with fundamentals so intense that innovation could ride on top of it rather than replace it. For the manager in a mid-sized shop, the partner running a small sales force, the director juggling quality and budgets, the translation is simple and brutal: reduce variability. Design work so that it survives when you are tired, when key people leave, when the market pivots. Teach one clear standard, measure it daily, and improve it by 1% a week. Reward the person who finds a recurring problem, not the person who hides it. Build rituals, short huddles, real-time feedback, a visual board that refuses to be ignored. Over time, those rituals become reputation. If the story leaves you with a single practical impulse, let it be this: pick one process that fails you most often and make it unstoppable. Which of these hurts you today? Lack of discipline, lack of focus, or lack of customers? If you want more concrete steps drawn from Toyota's playbook, tell me which pain you choose, and we'll walk through a plan you can start on Monday. If this resonated, A small gesture helps us reach others who need steady systems more than sudden heroics. And there are more lessons ahead.